Okay, well, I have actually a list of questions today. And it's also the divine disappearance day of Srila Gaur Kisor Das Babaji Maharaj, who is in our Guru Parampara, in our this line of the line of disciplic succession. So maybe I'll say a few words first about his divine grace, and then we can go to some of the questions. So it's very, very valuable for us to remember these great souls, because they, through their conduct and their divine character, they give us a tangible representation, of spiritual truth. It brings things out of the books into into real life, and they show us the value of what we are trying to follow in a tangible way, and they give us some inspiration, how in the midst of this world, this mad world we live in, that it is possible to live a life for higher cause, higher purpose. And so Gaur Kisor Das Babaji, he was a Babaji, that as is in his title, which indicates that he lived aloof to the general conventional ways of practicing. He was beyond. He was transcendental to the conventional modes of spiritual practice, fully absorbed in the higher plane and completely detached, utterly detached from anything of this world, and he lived a life of extreme renunciation. We hear sometimes he would just eat on rice that had been raw rice that had been left soaking for a few days, or he eat that with some chilies, and he would eat, there was a chili sabji preparation just made completely of chili that he would eat sometimes, and very, very simply. He would also, we hear that sometimes he would live in a public bathroom to avoid too much attention, to avoid too much crowd, too many people flocking around him. And sometimes it's mentioned he lived under an upside down boat, an upturned boat on the bank of the Ganges. And, this was during a time, this is like late 1800s, early 1900s, around that time period. And this was a time when there were many false Babajis. There were many persons who were imitating the practices of a Babaji, and in some cases also engaging, there was a spectrum of these false Babajis, and some of them, they were simply imitating and following the practices without any real substance within. And others, sadly, they also engaged in degraded practices, while externally showing themselves to be very renounced. So there were many who were like that, who were, they may have even had some fame as being, a great sadhu, a great saint, but they were lacking the real substance. There was one famous occasion when Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, he completed the Vrindavan parikrama over some period, and then at the end there was an address he made to his followers, and it said that he, in a very kind of dramatic way, he slapped his hand to his forehead in lamentation and expressed, I am very unfortunate because I've been through the whole of Vrindavan, but I could not meet a single Vaishnava. I could not meet one real Vaishnava. That was his his lamentation. And everyone was surprised, you know, he's just been through Vrindavan, which is normally considered to be the place where the highest souls live. And there are so many persons following very strict practices, living here. How can he say such a thing? You know, they were very surprised. And in fact, they mentioned one in particular, one Babaji in particular, who had some fame as being of a very high level of Vaishnava. And what about so-and-so? And Saraswati Thakur said, oh, he is a Kanishta class, you know, Vaishnava, Kanishta beginner level, you know. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj actually went to visit him later, and observing him, he understood that, you know, he was following all the practices in some stereotyped way, but the real substance was lacking from his heart. But in any case, you know, there were many like this, and there were very few who were recognized and acknowledged by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati as being authentic Babajis, you know. So Gaur Kisor, who we are honoring today, he was one of them. And then there are a few others like Jagannath Das Babaji, Vamsi Das Babaji, you know, there were a handful. So Gaur Kisor, he was one of a small group who were, you know, acknowledged by Srila Saraswati Thakur, you know, as being authentic. And of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, in fact, took initiation from him, took diksha from him on the order of his father, Bhakti Vinod. You know, it was the order of Bhakti Vinod Thakur that Saraswati Thakur take connection from Gaur Kisor. You know, so it was on his order that he did that, and he, you know, he was utterly renounced from anything of this world, as we said, and he had no desire for followers or fame, power, influence, any of these things, and in fact, he rejected Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati when he came on the order of his father to request an initiation. He rejected him, you know, because he didn't want, he avoided, you know, any position where he would gain followers and fame. You know, he deliberately avoided that kind of circumstance in his life. And so he refused him. But Saraswati Thakur, he requested him again and again. And we hear something like 17 or 18 times. And you know, we've heard that Gaur Kisor, he would always evade him in some way, you know, like he would say, oh, you know, you're asking me to give you connection, but I have to ask permission from Mahaprabhu, you know, so come back again later. And then so Saraswati Thakur came back later, and, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I forgot to ask, you know. So come again another time, you know. So it went on like this, and it was quite a striking thing in the society at the time, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he had some position within society. You know, his father was Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who was, you know, this famous Bengali magistrate working for the British government, very, you know, highly educated, you know, well-known, you know, had some influence in society, very respected by the Bengali section and the British section, you know. And then his son was this star student, you know, who he won, you know, at a young age, he received some distinction from an astronomical society, and he was known as being very brilliant. So, you know, Bhaktisiddhanta, Saraswati, he was the kind of person who, you know, persons wanted to make their disciple, you know, persons who were acting in the capacity of a guru, they would feel honored to have him as their disciple. He was that kind of person in society at that time. So for him to be rejected by Gaur Kisor, that was quite striking. And And Saraswati Thakur, in fact, he, in his humility, he later mentions that, you know, he expressed, I had some pride, you know, at you know, at my culture, my education, my position in society. I had some pride about that, you know, but I had so much you know, with all of my learning, my knowledge, I had some ego about that, you know. But I could understand, you know, when this great soul, this great Paramahamsa, Gaur Kisor, and another point is that Gaur Kisor was actually illiterate himself. He could not even write his own name, you know. So that just compounded this even more, you know. And so Saraswati Thakur, he expressed, you know, later, like, this was, I realized later, this was my Guru's mercy upon me, you know, that, you know, he was utterly unimpressed by any value that I had according to the normal estimation of this world. You know, he was not impressed by that at all. And finally, you know, Gaur Kisor could not refuse him. And there, another comment that Saraswati Thakur made about Gaur Kisor is, he said that even though he was illiterate, he could not write his own name. I realized that all spiritual knowledge was contained within one of his toenails. You know, that is his position. You know, he may not have any learning of this world, but, you know, all spiritual truth, you know, could be found in a particle of his foot dust. You know, he made that kind of expression. You know. And he, you know, so then also Saraswati Thakur was practically his only disciple. You know, Srila Sridhar Maharaj mentioned maybe he had one or two others, but they're not known. You know, but Saraswati Thakur is the only disciple that is known, that he accepted. And, you know, another point we can note is that, you know, Bhakti said that, you know, those of the acting in the capacity of an acharya, you know, they're like, you know, acharya means one who teaches by their example, by their own character and conduct. They demonstrate how to practice. So in our modern line, you know, we are living, you know, in a style of a mission, a preaching mission. And so, you know, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, you know, he followed, you know, particular modes of conduct, you know, in order to show some standard to society and to sincere practitioners. But those, such as Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, they were not concerned with any such things. You know, they were not concerned with preaching or setting an example to society or any such things. You know, they were living wholesale in connection with the higher world, with the upper world. You know, and they did not care for anything else. They were living an authentic life of bhajan, divine service, to the higher plane. You know, and they were not concerned with anything else. You know, any considerations of this world. So, you know, we don't imitate or follow the practices of the Babajis, but we can appreciate their examples. You know, their example is very helpful for us, you know. And so, you know, there are many instances in the life of Gaur Kishore which are, you know, they are shining examples for us. One famous story, which many of you are no doubt familiar with, is you know, Gaur Kishore, he had some, because of his authenticity, although he avoided it, he had some fame and some renown, you know, because it was, you know, many could see that he was a genuine Vaishnava, you know, of the highest caliber. And I think there was like some local king who used to come and visit him. There, there were some persons of influence who had high regard for him. And so on one occasion, there was one, in India, there's something of a business surrounding different spiritual practices. And one of the more well-known ones is Bhagavat Pat, means reading of the Bhagavatam. That some people, the Bhagavatam scripture, some people, they do it as a kind of business, and you have to pay some money to hear this recitation. And so there was one man like that, and he thought, if it is seen by the public that Gaur Kisor is hearing my Bhagavat class, then that will increase my fame within society, and that will be good for my business. And so he requested Gaur Kisor on several occasions, oh, please, will you hear my Bhagavatam class? And Gaur Kisor, was not interested. And then finally refused him. But the man wouldn't give up. And so finally, one day he came and he sat on his doorstep. Gaur Kisor had some type of simple residence on the banks of the Ganges at that time. And so this man just came and like set himself up right by his doorway, and he began giving this recitation. And finally he completed it and he left. And then Gaur Kisor, he had some assistant servitor there at the time, said, please bring some cow dung and purify this area, cleanse this area. And that man, that assistant, he was puzzled. He said, oh, but the Bhagavatam has been recited here. That must be the most purifying activity, the most purifying vibration. So how can you tell me to clean this area? And Gaur Kisor told him, oh, you heard Bhagavatam? I only heard rupee, like money. That's all that I heard. That's, he was only hearing the vibration, not the words that was coming from that man, but he was connecting only with that vibration. And another famous story connected with Gaur Kisor was because as I mentioned, the tendency of Babajis is they're not concerned for the public or any conventional practices. So he would dress in a very disheveled way, barely wearing anything, and not always looking so clean, and his hair maybe looking a little wild sometimes. And so on one occasion, there were some boys who were chasing after him, throwing stones at him, and making fun of him. And Gaur Kisor, he didn't blame those boys, but he began shouting to Krishna, because he was living on such a high level of consciousness that he directly saw that this was coming from Krishna. And he told to Krishna, oh, Krishna, if you don't stop this, I'm going to complain to Mother Yashoda, and she's going to chastise you. I know you're the person causing trouble here. You're such a troublemaker. I'm going to complain to your mother. That was his high vision, directly seeing the connection of Krishna. Does anyone else remember some incidents from Gaur Kisor they want to share? Maybe Suvasini Didi. there's some few other incidents that we hear also. Srila
Incident,
yes.
Like well, I can't explain clearly, but maybe you can. It's just like, he said something like, if a pregnant woman, going labor, and it is not like, you can't produce a child without, just making some noise like a labor. You can't, give a child, but so many the things have to be there before that, it is so that one.
Yeah, that's a very good remembrance. Our Gurudev Srila Govinda Maharaj, he often, many times we heard him tell that story, that there was a man who tried to imitate Gaur Kishor Das Babaji, and so he set up some bhajan kutir, some simple residence beside him at one time, and then he started to imitate him, like chanting so many rounds every day, and perhaps showing some symptoms of ecstasy sometimes, and living in a very, very renounced way, and eating and very renounced, etc. And somebody mentioned that to Gaur Kishor. What do you think about this man? He set up right next to him and following, copying him and everything he was doing. And then he said what Suvasini Didi just quoted, that if a woman enters a labor room and starts making lots of noises and so many motions, is a baby going to come out? No, but there's some, required activities that take place before that, So it's a very nice example. I'm glad you reminded us of that, Didi. So similarly in our practicing lives, we can imitate things and we can pretend that we've attained something, but if we haven't actually gone through the real process, then we won't, it's all just air, it's empty, there's nothing there. So we have to develop the proper conception, we have to follow the process, we have to follow the guidance of the Vaishnavas, and so on and so forth. There's a procedure and there's a process. We cannot just imitate the end result. It will just be empty. So yes, that is a very valuable teaching of Gaur Kishor Das Babaji. And another incident that's quite well known is at the end of it, after he passed away, there was actually some quarrel because he, as I mentioned, he was someone who had some fame and some degree of respect within the Vaishnava community. And so there were some persons who, of the Babaji section, imitationists, some business, out of this happens, you can have a nice temple and pilgrims will come and give support. So they thought, we can make a samadhi with his body, and because he has some fame, people will come and they will, give financial support to that. And so there was actually something of a fight, where this group of Babajis, they flocked around his body and they wanted to claim him, but then Saraswati Thakur came and he was able to assert himself as the disciple. I'm his disciple, so I have some right. And maybe Chinmoy, do you remember that exactly? You heard Gurudev tell that story, right? No, maybe Suvasini Didi.
I've never heard this story, no.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Gurudev told it a few times. Maybe Suvasini or Govindandi or Jayadev, you can remember.
I could try. I just heard it from Srila Madhusudana Maharaj. He had mentioned it. So he asserted that he was his disciple, But then he said, because he's a Naishtika brahmachari, so he had never had relations with a woman at all, Saraswati Thakur. And he had challenged them. How long has it been since you've had relations with the women? And I can't tell it as well, but he says like 1 year, 3 months, a week, and each, group, they all fell back one by one until no one was left standing. He was the only one there that could say he hadn't had relations with women.
Right. Yeah. And Gurudev also mentioned once how there was because this was like becoming a scene, and there were some police officers who came to try and manage this crowd, and Saraswati, and this is before Saraswati Thakur issued that challenge, and so and Saraswati Thakur was saying like nobody will be able to take him, only I will be able to take him, and then there's one police officer who was surprised at his confidence and like, how can you be so sure of yourself? And he said, or maybe it was right after he issued the challenge, who was actually a genuine, pure Babaji. And then a police officer said, like, how can you be so sure about this? Like, they can just lie to you if they want. And Saraswati Thakur, he said something like, they will not be able to lie to me. Like, I'm a Naishtika brahmachari, I'm a very pure conduct. They cannot lie to me. They will not be able to lie to me. And also, Srila Sridhar Maharaj made another comment about that incident that I was hearing today, and he said that that one of these, I think it was one of the police officers also, because somebody said, maybe Saraswati Thakur said, oh, he was a great Paramahamsa. And then this police officer said, oh, really? He was a Paramahamsa. We've heard of Ram Krishna Paramahamsa. Was he a Paramahamsa like him? And Saraswati Thakur responded, my Guru Maharaj, he was such a Paramahamsa that thousands of Ram Krishna Paramahamsas will come and take his foot dust. He made some comment like that. So it was quite a scene. It was quite a scene. And in fact, there were all these politics. This is one of the things that is so sad, in spiritual practice, when politics become involved. And so Saraswati Thakur initially wanted to take his body across the river to Mayapur, where he had his main temple. But because of the local opposition, he was forced to keep him in the Navadvip area. And so he made some samadhi for him there. But then, interestingly, what happened is because the Ganga is always moving, like now the Ganga is actually moved quite far from our temple. It used to be very close to our temple, but it's moved closer, much closer to Mayapur. So what happened is, through the movement of the Ganga over the course of some years, then that samadhi became covered over. And so Saraswati Thakur, he was given some, reason to take his remains and move him to Mayapur, which he had wanted originally. So now his samadhi is there, and it's within the compound of the Chaitanya Mat in Mayapur. So he's there now. So, and he was Gaur Kisor, we can also mention, he had some, friendship with Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and he used to hear Bhagavatam, in fact, from Bhakti Vinod Thakur. So, yeah. Jai Gaur Kisor Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Okay, well, I have a few questions. Tunga Rasa had a question. And also Chinmoy Prabhu, he had a few. So I don't know where I should start.
Start with Tungarasa, please.
Okay. Okay, so Tungarasa, you had a question about I think it was Vaisnav Aparad, is that right?
Yes, I heard that, was thinking that maybe it is good for us to discuss or to remember or how to avoid those.
Okay, but there was something, I remember when you told me the other day, there was something more specific, but I don't remember what it was right now.
No, I just mentioned that it was lesson. It was questioned also to Janardhan Maharaj from Saraswati Didi, that she just make some like proposal, maybe that some devotees they leave. Maybe it is because of Vaishnava
That's right.
Yeah, but it is not sure. There are maybe many causes for that, but anyway, it is very serious subject. And
I see. So your question was, or the question you're referring to, it was that when people, that if we see persons leaving Krishna consciousness, is that due to Vaishnava Aparad, offense to a Vaishnava? That was the question.
Actually, it was not my question.
Yes, I understand.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It was like some, maybe we don't know, but
right.
Is it like the cause of this? Yeah. Because
see.
Of that.
Well, I'm sure Janardhan Maharaj answered perfectly, but I can just add a few thoughts to that, which is that I think you may have just said yourself the answer, that we can't be sure. There may be different reasons. It will be different in every case. In some cases, and I don't think it's something that we want to analyze too much. That's something for our Guru Dev to consider, or for us to consider in ourselves. There may be different reasons for a person leaving, and we will, it may simply be that it is a temporary thing. Sometimes the pull of our karma, or the waves of the environment, they may take us in different directions, and our spiritual wealth may be underground for some time. Things may be dormant for some time. So it can be something like that. There's a famous verse in Bhagavad Gita, Nihabi kramo nashosti prajavayo na vidyate salpam apyasya dharmasya chayate mahatobayat, saying that whatever one, this is in the beginning, maybe chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita, that whatever one gains within devotion, it will never leave them. No, it will never, it can never be destroyed, because the nature of bhakti, it's connected to the eternal world. So one nice, simple and clear way that our Gurudev rendered that verse is, whatever one does in connection with the eternal world, it will have an eternal result. So real bhakti, it is pertaining to the nirguna plane. The nirguna plane means the plane, the world that is beyond the gunas, beyond the modes of material nature. And that plane, it is an eternal plane. It is a permanent plane. It is pertaining always to permanent values and permanent wealth, etc. So whatever one does in connection with that higher transcendental plane, it can never be diminished. cannot be lost or destroyed. It may be covered over for some time. You know, sometimes, as I said, you know, our karma can get the upper hand, or some pull of the environment, of the Maya illusory environment may get the upper hand, and it may take someone away for some time. But when the circumstances are favorable again, you know, then we will think that, you know, they will be back. You know? And then Krishna also gives that assurance, right, later in Gita, that when Arjuna asks that question, right, you know, what happens if somebody enters into the practice and then halfway through their, you know, their lower nature gets the upper hand and they leave the practice, then what? It's like they've lost everything. They've lost the material side and they've lost the spiritual side. And but Krishna gives that reassurance that in their next life, you know, they will pick things up again. You know, I will make sure they have a good circumstance, you know, that is favorable to their continued practice. I will take care of that, you know. So that is, you know, that is how we will think, you know, and we will always be hopeful if we see that someone is leaving. And it's also something that we see sometimes, you know. We see persons who leave for some time and they come back. I mean, I've seen many cases like that myself. So it may be something like that, you know. But it's true, it could also be due to offenses, you know. And that is more serious. And that is what we want to try to avoid, because Vaishnava aparad in particular, you know, we're told that is the one thing that can wholly destroy whatever wealth we have. Other kinds of offenses, they will not be considered so much. But the one thing Krishna does not tolerate is offenses to his devotees, because his devotees, they are more dear to him than his own self. So we are told that is the one thing that can, you know, just, you know, that analogy is given of the creeper of devotion, bhakti, the bhakti lata growing in our garden, and Vaishnava aparad, it's the one thing that can come in and uproot that, you know, just like some nasty pest or rodents may come and you know, may you know, destroy what we're growing. Oh, there's another question here. Is it possible to explain what would be Vaishnava aparad and give an example? So just to finish that thought, yeah, some persons may leave due to that, and you know, that is a serious case, and we want to avoid that. And you know, it can also be some mixture, you know, because the offenses, there's also a gradation in offenses. It's not that all Vaishnava aparad is of that category where it will completely destroy our devotional wealth. You know, more commonly it is more minor things, having some critical mentality, some envy towards others. You know, these are all, you know, one type of Vaishnava aparad. You know, it depends on the, you know, the seriousness of the offense depends on the degree of our animosity, and also the caliber of Vaishnava. But we can also put ourselves in a dangerous position from harboring ill feelings towards junior Vaishnavas, you know. So we have to be very careful. That's our Gurudev warned us. That was something he warned us about a lot. And that's why he emphasized these teachings of humility, tolerance, and respect, because that is the only real danger in our spiritual life. So now Lila Midori's posted in the chat here. Can we explain what is Vaishnava aparad? Give an example. Yeah, it's a good question, actually, because it's not as straightforward as it sounds. It doesn't just mean that you've made a Vaishnava angry or you've upset a Vaishnava. That's not what it means necessarily. But more intrinsically, it refers to the feeling within our own heart. If we know what type of feeling we have towards it. It's mentioned in the scriptures that in Kali Yuga, there's this special dispensation that sin committed mentally is not counted, because in previous ages, even sin committed in the minds, you have to pay some reaction for that. But in this age, in Kali Yuga, because we are so degraded and the senses are so strong, there's this special allowance given that we won't be judged for our thoughts, thankfully. But Vaishnava aparad is different, because that is connected to a deeper plane. The Vaishnava, the quality, Vaishnavata, that's connected to the soul plane, to a deeper plane. And so if we even mentally hold ill feelings towards a Vaishnava, that will damage our spiritual growth. So that essentially, is what it is. There's actually a very helpful article written by Bhakti Vinod Thakur. Maybe I can even find it and share the link right now. And he discusses this elaborately, this topic, and he lists different types of. It's called Vaishnava Ninda. Ninda means like to criticize. So let me see if I can find it right now. Here it is. And he outlines there what, like, different examples of Vaishnav aparad, what constitutes, and, like, for example, to criticize a Vaishnava on the basis of material defects, like their appearance or maybe some low-born characteristics they have, like maybe their manner of speaking. Also, that is one thing mentioned. Another thing he mentions is to criticize a Vaishnava, he kind of like just covers everything, like there's no room for criticism. Like another one he mentions is to criticize a Vaishnava for something that they did wrong before they became devotees, before they, like, oh, now they, like, sometimes out of envy, we may think like that, right? Oh, now this person looks like a great devotee, but you know what they did before? What horrible, nasty things they did before, before somebody took up the practice of devotion, what bad things they did. That's one thing he mentions. And then he also mentions to criticize a devotee for mistakes that they make they may make currently in their practicing life, that they may make have some accident, and they may commit some sinful activity, to criticize them for that, So he lists different things. He does mention that he also mentions there that, when it is permissible to mention the faults of a Vaishnava. And he says that is in the case of instruction. If you are observing the faults or mistakes of a Vaishnava for the purpose of instructing others, understanding oneself, then that is permissible. Like sometimes there, like there's some cautionary tale, that is told, to give an example, to show an example to others of what not to do, So if it's done carefully, with a mood of respect and for the purpose of instruction, then that is permissible. So essentially, Vaishnava aparadh means to harbor some ill feeling, towards a Vaishnava, and to express that either mentally, verbally, publicly, privately, And another point that Srila Sridhar Maharaj has made is that if we do make some offense to a Vaishnava, then we must correct ourselves in the same manner in which it was made. So, in other words, if we insulted, criticized a Vaishnava publicly, then we must excuse ourselves publicly. We must ask to be excused. If it was in writing, it should be the request for forgiveness, the apology should be in writing, in whatever manner it was made, so it should be rectified, That is another point, because like there's one case where, one person insulted a Vaishnava publicly, and then later privately they made an apology. But our Gurudev didn't appreciate that. You made this criticism in a very public way, then you have to make your apology also in a public way. And it also, of course, must come from the heart. So, one point of confusion on this issue is that, sometimes devotees, they become a little like overly afraid about making offense, like every time if they make a devotee upset or angry, then they're afraid, oh, I made a big offense, And but Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he explains that even a Madhyam Adhikar Vaishnava, middle class Vaishnava, which is quite a high attainment actually, they still hold some anarthas. They still hold, they still have their material defects, lust, anger, greed, passion, arrogance, all these things. So even a relatively high level practitioner, they still have some material faults. So sometimes in the course of our service life, we may unintentionally upset them, but that just because they've become angry at us, that doesn't mean that we are going to hell. It doesn't mean that we've become big offenders, that actually that is their fault. That is due to their ego that they became upset, so that doesn't necessarily reflect on us or our intentions. But of course, for the sake of harmony, then we try to make peace with everyone and give honor where honor is wanted, etc. But we don't need to, think that now the gates of hell are open to us because we made somebody angry, because it really depends on our inner heart, That is what is significant. Does that clear things up, Leela Madhuri?
Thank you, Vishakha. Dhanyavad. Yeah, I always have endless questions, so I won't quiz you extensively about Vaishnava aparadh. But I was thinking on a side note, actually, when I even entered this Zoom meeting, that somehow maybe, what if one could write an instruction manual about interpersonal relations in the spiritual light? Because you get a lot of pop psychology all over the world right now. It can be very confusing, but I feel like Vaishnav, this conversation about Vaishnav Aparad is like a great starting point, but I'm like, my mind just wants like a big manual.
I'm sure there's a group of people that would nominate Didi for authoring that book.
I mean,
That would be great.
Isn't one of the six Goswamis, didn't they write a book on Vaishnava etiquette?
I mean, I don't know about exclusively on Vaishnava etiquette, but I mean, like the Hari Bhakti Vilas, mentions. I mean, I haven't been through it, but as I understand, there's some of these things are mentioned in there. Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not a big manual person. I feel like good intention, is the most important thing. And I think what's needed more is that we learn to become more accommodating of one another, and try to relate more in terms of one's intentions. And of course, I'm not saying that we disregard etiquette, but I think those are things that can be learned naturally in the course of our exchanges with the devotees. These are things that we'll naturally observe and pick up and learn. But I think the most important thing is that we are, we're trying to follow these principles of humility, tolerance, and respect. Follow these principles. That doesn't sound right to me, but what I mean is that I think you understand what I mean. Our hearts should become more open to others and more accommodating to others, and we want to. I think Gurudev says in one place, have a loveful heart. We want to have a more loveful heart. I think that's the most important thing, and that's really what will not only help us avoid Vaishnava Aparad, but more importantly, and this is another point, that Gurudev has made, we want to appreciate the Vaishnava. We don't want only to think about we don't want to just think about not criticizing, but we want to think about appreciating. We want to increase. We don't want to think too much about not going on the minus side. We want to try to go on the positive, the plus side. So, and we can progress like that. We can avoid falling down by not making offenses, not criticizing, but we can actually progress through increasing our appreciation for the Vaishnavas. So I think that's the most important thing. And if we are, we want to always be in the mode of a student, we can try to learn from everyone, we can learn from the senior devotee. We have something to learn from the senior devotees. We have something to learn from the junior devotees. And we also, we're developing inner discrimination. We can try to have clarity on, okay, this Vaishnava has this fault, but they also have this quality. So I will take the good part and I'll leave the bad part. This is what Paramahamsa Dharma is. Like the swan taking the milk from the water. So it's, I sometimes think of it as, I sometimes think of dealings with the devotees like a kind of dance, that you have to learn a little bit this way, a little bit that way. We want to find the right angle of the right point of adjustment in relation to every individual that we are reciprocating with. What's the right point of adjustment, the right point of connection, what the right distance, what is the relationship, and what am I taking, what am I leaving, what am I giving, all of these things have to be individually adjusted for each relationship that we have, so that's all I would say on that. Yeah, and I don't think we need to worry too much if we are following these broader principles of humility, tolerance, respect, affection. If we're following these broader principles, then that will actually cover everything. Everything else will automatically be included in that, etiquette and all these things. Those are things we'll pick up, if we are following those principles and maintaining good relationships with the devotees. Well, everything else will follow behind that, So, anyone else want to add any thoughts to that? Okay, well, Leela Maduri, any other comments?
I really appreciate what you just said, and I just feel like we do have it feels like a slogan at this point. I do have one small question. So I feel as if there is some confusion about how do you consider a Vaishnav? You mentioned junior Vaishnav. So do you consider a Vaishnav a disciple, an initiate? And then because you hear a more, what's the word? A more exact description of a Vaishnav is someone, the true Vaishnav. So then would you say someone that's a Vaishnav that's not a pure Vaishnav? Do they still deserve all of these things? Is Vaishnav, and so I heard you say junior Vaishnav, and I'm wondering if that's what you meant.
So you're referring to how we may make some distinction in different levels of Vaishnavas.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know that we live in a world of exploitation, and so this idea, it can be misunderstood, and so it must be understood that we're not speaking about this in a, like in a hierarchical, in like a rigid hierarchical kind of way, that we're in like a rigid society structure, and we have to, give particular degree of honor to persons of particular status. It is not like that, but we have to consider, what quality of Vaishnavata individuals have, what degree of Vaishnava quality individuals have, and what is the appropriate way for me to exchange with them? Yes, we give honor to everyone, but it will be adjusted according to the level of realization. So for example, if you want to do some service in the temple, then you will go to a particular Vaishnava, right? You won't ask anybody in the temple, what should I do? Maybe it depends, right? But overall, there will be particular person who knows best, what is the overall service vision of this temple, and what is it that we're moving towards. You want to be sure that you're in line, you're aligned with that person, right? You know, if you have a question about spiritual life, then you will not ask somebody who joined yesterday. You'll ask someone who you think has more developed realization. You know, if you want to give your whole life and your whole heart to a Vaishnava, you will do that to a Vaishnava who you have full confidence in. You know, you won't go and surrender yourself to anyone in the temple, right? But you will surrender yourself, you will put yourself at the feet of someone who you feel is worthy of such a high degree of honor. You know? No. We will also consider, you know, persons who have given a life of full surrender. No, I will give some extra honor to them, you know, because they are deserving of that. They are showing an example for the rest of the world of what this is, what these teachings are. They've given everything, so they're worthy of some particular respect. And I also want to invite their particular grace upon myself. You know, for me, in order for me to progress, I need the grace of higher Vaishnavas. That's actually the essence of spiritual life, receiving the grace of higher devotees. Those, by higher, I mean that they have more realization, they have more surrender, you know, they have given themselves more to the other side. So they have something more, and I need that for myself to be able to continue. You know, so I will give some special attention to them in order to invite their grace upon me. I want to show that I am in need of their mercy for my own continued progress in spiritual life. So I will give some you know, higher degree of honor to such persons. So it is mentioned, you know, what is that in Gurudev Kripa Binduti? Can't remember the line, but it's mentioned it's mentioned in different places, but I'm thinking of this one line in this song that we sing often, Gurudev Kripa Bindudiya, give honor to all as appropriate, you know, as appropriate, you know. So, you know, we don't want this to be done in like a kind of blind, rigid, hierarchical way, but you know, we need to, for our own healthy progress, there needs to be some distinction made, you know. And another thing is that if we give too much honor to persons who aren't really worthy of that, that's not so helpful for them. You know, that can be confusing for them. You know, like just as a simple example, if a child needs to be corrected, if a child is doing wrong, and the mother is you know, smothering the child with blind love, that is not the way to show her love in that moment. The proper expression of love in that moment will be to correct, to discipline and correct the child. So, you know, respect, you know, it will be shown in different ways according to the person, to the circumstance. So it is met in I don't know if you've been through Upadesh Amrita. Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada published it as the Nectar of Instruction. But one of the verses there is very helpful in this regard. And Srila Rupa Goswami, it's a short text. You should go through it if you haven't. It's 11 verses. But one of those verses, Srila Rupa Goswami, he's outlining different levels of Vaishnavas and what is the proper way to give respect to them. So Krishneti Yasya Girita Manasa Driyeta, this begins like that he says, one who has once taken the name of Krishna, we should honor them mentally. We may not formally show them so much respect. Of course, in a general sense, we will be respectful with them, but in terms of giving them some special distinction in the like formal respect, we won't show so much, but mentally we will honor them. And then it says then he says one who has, I don't know if I can remember the full verse, Krishneti Yasi Girita Mansu Krishna. But anyhow, we have another question here. And then one who has taken up this practice, and who is, seriously engaging in the practice, we will seek their friendship, and we will give a higher degree of respect to them. And then it mentions the third level, Vaishnava, one who has, one who's fully living in the higher plane. And interestingly, he mentions there one of the main characteristics of the highest level Vaishnava: they have no tendency to criticize others, and they are living in Krishna's connection in every circumstance. He says, to that type of Vaishnava, you should offer your whole life. That's the kind of respect you should give to them. You should surrender to them in your thought, word, and deed. So some distinction, some positive discrimination, should be made in our dealings with other Vaishnavas, for our own progress and also for that of others, Does that make sense? Does that clear things up, Leela Madhuri?
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Because as we know, Srila Maharaj, he identified Prabhupada, Swami Prabhupada, as a Shaktivesh avatar, because he has that vision. So I think it's also really helpful that the higher Vaishnavas, who they are saying are Vaishnavas, that we will understand. Because what is our vision? How can we really see a Vaishnava? That can be very difficult. What level of Vaishnava somebody is, I may not know. I cannot tell who is who. But if we look, if we're hearing from, if Gurudev, I saw Gurudev give so much respect to Janardhan Maharaj as a Vaishnava. So I will honor Janardhan Maharaj as a high Vaishnava, because I saw a pure Vaishnava honoring that person as a high Vaishnava. So for me, that also is helpful. Those higher Vaishnavas who they are respecting, who they are giving honor to as a Vaishnava, I will give my honor there.
Yes, very nice. Yes, definitely. We don't have the eyes to see. So where we see a genuine, who we know to be a genuine Vaishnava has indicated or recognized another, then we can put confidence there. And sorry, go ahead.
So that was helpful to appreciate the levels and distinctions. I've heard that before. There's levels of honor and respect that we give according to the level that person is at. I guess there's one small concern that I have, and I've heard this sentiment before, that we only have to reserve certain sentiments for the pure Vaishnav or for the higher Vaishnav, and others are not real Vaishnav, so therefore we don't owe basically anything to them if they're not a pure or true or real Vaishnav. Because if you were to really examine what the word Vaishnav means, like most of us are not, right, a real Vaishnav. So that sentiment, I just want to, I wish it was more clear, a little more clear how
we have to be careful. We have to be careful with that kind of thinking, because if somebody has one drop of Vaishnava quality, that is genuine Vaishnava quality, even if it's only a drop. And that has to be honored. That's something authentic. Gurudev mentioned a few times that we can think of it in terms of percentage. Maybe someone has 5% Vaishnava quality, another person has 10%, another person has 50%, but they still have that genuine, whether it's 1% or 50%, that's something authentic there, that's something real. So that has to be honored, that has to be appreciated in a genuine way. And another thing is that we do not want to underestimate any Vaishnava, because we also have to consider the relationships that the Vaishnavas have. We have to consider the potential that is surrounding Vaishnavas. We don't know like what someone is going through, where they've come from, where they're going, where they are. We don't know, Yes, we may not treat everyone on the same level that we would treat our who we recognize to be a fully pure Vaishnava. We don't need to treat anyone else like that, but we have to honor what somebody has, whether it's even if it's just 1%, we do have to honor that. And we don't want to underestimate what can flow through somebody's heart. Even an unworthy instrument may be able to shine something very brightly. Something may come through someone. So we have to be open to that, see how Krishna is appearing in the hearts of others. How is the voice of my Guru coming through the heart of this Vaishnava? How is the will of the Lord playing in the heart of this Vaishnava? We have to be open to that. We have to be careful. We have to be very careful. I can understand why some devotees, they think like that, and there's some reason for saying that and thinking like that, but the danger of that is becoming cynical and hardened. One can become hardened and disconnected from the fresh current, because the current of Krishna consciousness is always flowing. And as long as a Vaishnava is trying to stay connected, to other Vaishnavas, to the service line, then anything can come through them. So we have to be open to that. It's a living thing, it's a living thing. So it's living and it's dynamic and it's vital, and we should not underestimate any Vaishnava. Gurudev would appreciate the children. He mentioned once, like when he was in Australia, like how they are like my guru. I'm seeing their wonderful enthusiasm for Krishna consciousness, and I'm learning from that. I'm gaining something from that. So we have to be careful with that way of thinking. Krishna consciousness, it's always the middle path, and not too far this way, not too far that way. We don't want to be too indiscriminate, and we also don't want to be too discriminating. We don't want to go too far to the relative or too far to the absolute side, but the middle path. Yes, we see in the Vaishnavas, in our acquaintance, that they have some material characteristic, and we have to be wary of that. We have to be careful and conscious of that, of their material nature. But behind that, there is that spiritual connection that's also playing in their heart. And we cannot underestimate that also. So we have to be careful. And, you know, sometimes I've experienced myself, and I've seen from others, you know, that, you know, maybe you've known a devotee for 10, 15 years, and you've had a particular opinion, and they surprise you one day, you know, they surprise you like, wow, that's what's in their heart. I didn't know that was there. Like that one time, one devotee who has a bit of a reputation as being very hard, you know, one day they confided in me, and they've done many things, you know, which are not always so kind. And one day they confide, and I've known them for many years, and one day they confided in me, you know I've made many mistakes, you know, I've done many things wrong. You know, I haven't always treated other Vaishnavas well, you know, they just opened their heart to me. And I was so shocked to hear that, you know. Sometimes you see a devotee has a particular persona, you know, that they're known by. And then one day they show you the vulnerable side within. You know? And you know, sometimes I have these experiences and I think, oh, that's what my Gurudev was seeing. You know, I seen, like, I couldn't understand why my Gurudev gave so much time to that Vaishnava. Why my Gurudev was so merciful to that and tolerant of that. I couldn't understand. But now I'm seeing this deeper layer in their heart. And that's what my Gurudev was trying to connect with. And that's what he was seeing. You know? So that's another thing, you know, that many of us experienced with Srila Govinda Maharaj, that, you know, maybe we didn't have a good relationship with someone, but we saw they have a good relationship with my Gurudev. So I want to try also. You know, there's more to this person than what I'm experiencing. So I should try, you know. So, you know, everyone has this higher aspect within them, and we want to try to connect with that and see that it's a living thing. It's a dynamic and vital living thing. So, and, you know, for the most part, we'll try to think that everyone is my guru, you know. Yes, there is a level of distinction. There's always the two sides, right? There's one level on which we are making distinction, but on another level, in a broader sense, we are seeing everyone as our guru. We can learn from everyone. Everyone is there to instruct us. So there's always this interplay of these two sides, and we have to take both into account in our consideration and dealings with the devotees. It's not a black and white matter. Well, maybe we'll stop there because we are pushing it for. I don't want to interrupt anything. There is that
was beautiful. Thank you. I just want to say, that you touched my heart. Thank you.
I'm glad, Madhuri. I'm glad. I know what it's like, you know, in the temple, everyone has their opinion, and everyone will say their theory about this and about that. But you don't have to, you know, many things that you hear, you have to take with a pinch of salt, you know. So
can I offer one small theory or opinion or whatever you want to say of mine that might be relevant or helpful?
Please.
I don't know where it came to me, but this, whether it was told to me or it was, sometimes things just arise, you know, in practice, whatever. But that we're worshiping the Vaishnava in the person. And some people have more Vaishnava in them, some people have less, but everyone has Vaishnava in them. And so we're giving respect to them, that part. We can worship that in anyone, even
you've just muted yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, even like a quote materialist or someone who has no connection to Krishna consciousness, even they have Vaishnava in them somewhere, right? Like everyone is an eternal servant of Krishna. So we're not worshiping their ego or their personality, or we don't even have to trust their personality, but we can trust that we can love, respect, and honor the Krishna consciousness within them that everyone has, some kind of thing like that. Like we're giving respect and honor to that, not to the personality, relative personality. I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's nice. There's actually a nice quote of Srila Gurudev where he says that we will give respect to everyone because everyone has the property of service to Krishna in their heart. Even if, as you said, it may not be manifest right now, it may be very, very dormant within them, but nevertheless it is there. And so we want to honor that, you know. So yes, very nice. And lastly, Arjuna, our friend Arjuna here, saying how to please Vaishnav instead of hurting or criticizing. Well, don't criticize, don't hurt them. I feel like you've answered the question there already. Try to please them, and try not to hurt them or criticize them. But as just a simple answer, I can also add that, you know, these helpful advices of Lord Chaitanya Dev, of, you know, to try to be Trinada Pisunichena Tsoriva Sahishtuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahadi, you know, to be more humble than a blade of grass, tolerant as a tree, and to give honor to others without expecting it for ourselves. You know, these teachings are Gurudev emphasized a lot, and they will protect us. He made the point, they will protect us from offending the devotees if we can follow those teachings. So in a broad way, you know, I think, you know, that's how I'll answer that. So maybe we'll wrap things up there. Very nice to be here with all of you. We had some lively discussion. Chinmoy Prabhu, any final words?
Well, thank you so much, Didi, for joining us and giving us this beautiful talk.
Thank you, Prabhu, and all of the, you know, wonderful assembled Vaishnavas here. Well, I look forward to next week.
Jai Vishakha Devi Dasi ki
Jai Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Sundar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. The assembled devotees ki Jai. Jai ki Jai. Chinmoy Dev Guru ki Jai. Hari Nam Sankirtan ki Jai. Jai Gaur Prem ki Jai.
Haribo.
Haribo.